Okay, in part two of the Shakespearean verse concepts, we learned about blank verse, rhymed verse, and prose, and how those three are the basic approaches that Shakespeare takes to writing his characters' lines within plays. And now we have to understand, and sorry, let me draw to it, we have to understand why exactly he uses this. Here's how you understand Shakespearean verse concepts and use them. He'll use variations within approaches to writing. He will vary from rhymed verse to blank verse to prose, back and forth. Sometimes the shifts will not be all that prevalent. An entire scene might appear in prose, for example, with no variation. Or you may see a scene in blank verse where most of the characters are speaking blank verse, but one is noticeably speaking in prose. He will create variations, he will create continuity for a specific purpose. And here are the two purposes of this. He'll create continuity because he wishes for you to understand the character of the speaker. So if a speaker is speaking in blank verse, maybe a speaker is very serious, very educated, he might also use it to present the mood of the scene. If a character starts speaking in rhyme, that lightens the mood quite a bit. If a character moves into blank verse, that might darken the mood or make it more serious. If you understand the variation among the different types of verse, blank verse, rhymed verse, and prose, then you can start to understand subtle levels of meaning that Shakespeare creates. Look at this continuum. If you see the continuum, and it's a fairly rough continuum, I think a linear continuum is not necessarily the best model to understand Shakespearean verse, but it moves from the very strictest verse up here at blank. And this means iambic pentameter with no rhyme scheme whatsoever. 10 syllables per line, accent on the second syllable of every foot, all the way down here to the loosest prose. This means absolutely no structure whatsoever, no clear structure to the words or the lines. The characters are just speaking without dividing according to syllables, and everything in between. If you look at the probable narrative purpose, you can see that up here at blank, this means that noble or educated characters are delivering lines of great importance. So a duke speaking about the governance of a city would probably be speaking in blank verse. Hamlet speaking about whether or not he should commit suicide would be speaking in blank verse. Rhymed verse is something that would, once again, lighten the mood, something that's a little bit mischievous and relaxed. And serious people who suddenly drop into rhymed verse are probably doing so because they're acting foolishly. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are unintelligent. It simply means that they're acting foolishly. If we drop down into prose, there are two very probable narrative purposes here. Is a noble or educated character delivering lines where they're speaking like a commoner? So imagine somebody who is very educated existing within a bar scene where they are speaking rather profanely, they're acting rather vulgar with everybody else there. Then they might speak in prose, but then they move into a more formal setting, a court, and they might speak in blank verse. The difference between the types of verse or the types of lines that Shakespeare writes with these characters indicates a difference in that case of environment. If in one case they are surrounded by lower class common folks who do not speak very intelligently, well, they will probably mimic that. But once they enter the court, they will probably become much more formal. With uh, low-born characters, lower-class characters who are very uneducated, and especially if they speak in vulgar terms, they will speak in prose. They do not have the intelligence nor the structure to speak in any sort of verse, rhymed or blank, so they would simply speak in prose. Understanding the variation and understanding the character of verse can tell you a lot about the characterization present in the play and what exactly is going on with the plot. And sometimes Shakespeare's use of verse will surprise you. He will drop into prose at a moment when you are not quite sure that he should. He will write a character's speech in blank verse when you're not quite sure that he should. And these variations will help you understand what exactly Shakespeare intends to do with the entire story.